when Jesus came into the coasts of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" Verse 14 says, "And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others, Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Verse 15 says, he said unto them, "But whom say you that I am?" Verse 16 says, and Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Verse 17 says, and Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." Verse 18 says, "And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So friends, what are these gates of hell that Jesus talked about? To properly understand, these gates that Jesus said will not prevail against the church, where we need to know the historic past of the city of Caesarea Philippi. We've got to know the ancient biblical and documented incidences which took place in that city, the occurrences, the events, the happenings, things that happened in that city, since it was in this city of Caesarea Philippi that Jesus made that profound statement, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Caesarea Philippi then was known as Banias. In the Old Testament, it was known as Banias, and it sat at the base of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon today is still known as Banias, located in the tribe of Dan, the northeastern region of Israel. So if you go to Israel today and say to them that you want to go to Caesarea Philippi, they will take you to Banias. They will take you to Banias. In the time of Christ, it was Caesarea Philippi, but in these days, it is known as Banias, and is in the tribe of Dan, the northeastern region of Israel. Now, you need to know this. The early Canaanites worshipped Baal at the foot of this mountain, Mount Hermon, in a limestone cave with a deep gulf of ferocious spring of waters. Now, friends, many years later, the cult of Baal was replaced with the worship of Greek gods. And the number of gods worshipped at the foot of this mountain were 7. During the time of Jesus, the most important god among these 7 gods worshipped in Caesarea Philippi was Pan, P-A-N, Pan, the Greek god of shepherds and the wild. Pan's legs and horns were like that of a goat. This god, this most important god of the Greeks in the time of Jesus, has legs like that of a goat and horns like that of a goat. His upper body was, of man. His upper body was of a man. The Greeks believed Pan was born in this cave located at the foot of the mountain, and is often associated with music and fertility. You've got to understand this. This god is often associated with music and fertility. Each spring, the people of Caesarea Philippi engaged in wicked deeds. I believe that Jesus visited that place during spring, during the season of spring. And in that season, the people of Caesarea engaged in wicked deeds, including prostitution and sexual interaction between humans and goats. They will have sexual intercourse with goats to entice and to invoke the return of Pan, the most important Greek gods, the most important Greek god in the time of Jesus. The worshippers of this god believed that he hibernated to the underworld every winter and returned in springs. When the Romans conquered this territory, Herod the Great gave it to his son Philip, who rebuilt the city and named it after Caesar and added a Roman temple there. During the early years of the Roman occupation, the local people continued to focus their worship on Pan, the Greek god. The cult or the temple of Pan, among other temples or cults of other gods, was located on the cave. Remember the cave I mentioned earlier. And at the bottom of this cave, was a deep gulf, a deep gully, a rift, a cleft with a spring, a large body of deep and ferocious waters. The worshippers threw their slaughtered goats into these powerful waters in the cave. The sacrifice was accepted by Pan if the goat sank. If the goat floated, it meant Pan had rejected their offering. And the worshippers were required to purchase another goat and try again. This deep gulf, this deep gully, was what was known as the gates of hell. The worshippers believed it was through this gulf, this gully, that the god Pan hibernated to the world, to the underworld in winter. They also believed this deep gulf was the gate to the land of the departed souls. So it was in this place and environment Jesus decided to announce his messiahship. It was in this setup and atmosphere Jesus boldly announced he was the Christ. He was the Messiah. This is the first place the word church was mentioned. The church here in Greek means ecclesia, a called out people. In fact, Jesus took the disciples to Caesarea Philippi for them to understand the kind of spiritual warfare they will engage with. You remember, Jesus will also go to to Jerusalem, in the temple in Jerusalem. And when he goes to the temple in Jerusalem, he will tackle the religious setup. So in this Caesarea Philippi, Jesus was addressing the occultic, the paganism that the church will be fighting, that this pagan worship, this occultic worship will come against the church, but they will not prevail. It was in this place that a prophetic declaration of spiritual warfare between the church and the gates of hell was announced, and the victory was predicted. I sensed Jesus was pointing at the court, at the temple of Pan, situated in the cave at the foot of this mountain, and was telling his disciples, whatever these gates represented will come against the church, but they will not prevail. The temple of Pan was a place where all kinds of occultism and orgies took place, where men danced with goats and had sex with them to invoke and invite their gods. These gates of hell are the gates through which immorality, sensual music and entertainment, sorcery, incantations, occultism, paganism, and all sorts of evil permeate the society. Jesus was indirectly telling them to watch out for these gates. Today, these gates have been rebranded, repackaged, and given new names. These gates have been institutionalized and accepted by many global leaders and systems. These gates are located in different villages, in cities, and nations of this world. These gates of hate are gallantly pushing and creeping into the church, but they will not prevail. It's a war between the church and the erotic, a fight between the church and occultism, a fight between the church and sensualism. Every day, these gates charges against us through nudity on the street, through obscenity on internet, and social media, through lewd entertainment on TVs and paid advertisements on occultism. These are the things we face every day. They are charging against us. Every day they are charging against us, but they will not prevail. Jesus said, I will build my church. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Friends, we will win no matter their onslaught. We will conquer no matter their bombardment. Jesus said they will not prevail against the church, and that is our assurance. Matthew chapter 16 verse 16, I want to repeat it. And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Verse 17 says, And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood had not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. Verse 18 says, And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. It is your personal revelation about the person of Christ that will give you fortitude against these gates. This revelation doesn't come through the flesh. It doesn't come through human knowledge and wisdom. It doesn't come through association and experience. It doesn't come through observation and logic. It comes from the Father through the Holy Spirit. The church Jesus is building today is on the revelation of who he is, the Christ, the Messiah. He said unto them, But whom say you that I am? Friends, I want to ask, whom say you that Christ is? Whom say you that Christ is? Remember that coming to Jesus is having a personal knowledge of him. He said to Peter, Flesh and blood have not revealed this to you. Friends, you need a personal revelation of the person of Christ if you are to withstand the onslaughts of these gates that are charging against us. They are visible in the church. They are visible in the church, in our streets, on billboards, on TV, on internet, everywhere. They are creeping into our hearts. But I want to assure you that through the revelation of the person of Christ, well seated in our heart, solidly seated in our hearts, that we will conquer. Keep trusting him. He will not fail.